Chapter 7. Can it be done? Denham University of Theoretical Science, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Dr. Nathan Lynn sat at his desk absent-mindedly, holding a small figurine of an astronaut between his thumb and index finger, and a pen between his teeth. Upon hearing the sound of someone entering his office, he turned his chair and saw a man of a Japanese descent looking about. "Can I help you?" No response. The man simply continued examining the office and the object and papers scattered all about. "You know, if you want an appointment, my office hours are 9-5, he said. "Please, Dr. Lin," came a gravely voice from the opposite side of the room. Nathan turned his head and saw a man he recognized all too well, standing up and holding a copy of his horrible selling book about the Hollow Earth. Guys like us, don't do normal hours, do we?" the man asked, while putting the book down on the desk. "I've been fixated on the Hollow Earth as long as you have, maybe longer. The theory that it's the birthplace of all titans is fascinating," the man continued. "Yeah, your book was very impressive," said the Japanese man. "Oh yeah? Well, I got about 30 unsold boxes in my apartment. You can have a feel, if you'd like," Dr. Lin replied. "Walter Simmons," said the gravely voiced man, while extending a hand for a shake. Nathan shook his hand and pointed at him. "I know who you are, sir. It's an honor." "No, the honor is mine, as is the urgency. Godzilla has never attacked us unprovoked before," Simmons said. "Yeah, I saw the news broadcast," Dr. Lin replied. "These are dangerous times, Dr. Lin. Allow me to introduce our Apex Chief Technology Officer, Mr. Ren Serizawa," Simmons continued. "Whoa, wait. Serizawa?" Dr. Lin asked. The corner of Ren's cheek twitched as he nodded slightly a few times. "Yeah, so, then that means he is," Dr. Lin began. "Yes, Dr. Lin. He is the son of the famous Dr. Ishiro Serizawa, but that's not important right now. What is important is what we do about the threat that Godzilla now poses to humanity. And now, my colleagues has something very interesting to show you." Ren placed a thick tablet-looking device on the table and tapped the corner. It came to life, with a blue light surrounding the exterior, and through the center before projecting an image of the Earth with a series of snake-like tunnels leading towards the central sphere, hundreds of miles into the planet's core. "Magnetic imaging from one of our new satellites," Simmons began. "And you know what this is, don't you, Dr. Lin?" "The Hollow Earth," Dr. Lin replied. "An ecosystem as vast as any ocean, right beneath our feet." Dr. Lin focused on a particular part of the projection and his jaws dropped. "The energy signal is enormous," he said, observing the energy readings as being in the hundreds of gigawatts hour, and almost identical readings to the readings from Gojira, Ren said with a particular emphasis on Gojira that contained a subtle hint of disdain. "This energy sustained the Hollow Earth, Dr. Lin, and it's what we believe allows for the conception of life forms as powerful as our aggressive Titan friend," Simmons continued. "If we can harness this life force, we can develop a device that can protect us from Godzilla, and to do that, I need your help." Dr. Lin chuckled nervously. I, uh, I don't know if I'm the right guy for the job, Mr. Simmons," he said while holding up a copy of his book. "Did you read the reviews? A sci-fi quack training in French physics." Look where we are. My office. It's in the basement right across from the flute class. Ren gave him a sideway look with a half smile, a subtle tremor in his throat being an obvious sign of holding back a chuckle. Besides, I'm not with Monarch anymore, and the Hollow Earth entry is impossible. We tried, he concluded. Simmons came forward and knelt down by the desk. I am sorry about your brother, Dr. Lin. He was a true pioneer and a visionary, he said. Dr. Lin shifted uncomfortably. Thanks. But Dr. Lin, all of our forward scans suggest a habitable environment down there. So, what really went wrong? What really went wrong on your brother's mission? Simmons probed. Dr. Lin stared at a globe that had been cut in half with a makeshift or put on a porthole to represent the hollow earth on a small table nearby. When they tried to enter, they hit a gravitational inversion. The entire planet's worth of gravity split in a second. He and the entire team were crushed in an instant, he said while fighting back tears, remembering the panic caused over the radio before silence and the static struck his ears. What if I told you that we at Apex have created a phenomenal craft capable of withstanding such an inversion? Simmons asked. Ren tapped the tablet, and a new projection of a vehicle called a HEAV-01 Heave appeared. The Hollow Earth aerial vehicle, Heave, Simmons said with a quiet pride and confidence. It can make the journey to the Hollow Earth possible, and I'll need you to lead the mission, Dr. Lin. Simmons approached Dr. Lin and gave him a serious look. Help me, he said simply. Help everyone. Because finding this needle in a haystack is our best shot against Godzilla. Dr. Lin pondered for a moment. Well, I might have an idea, but it's crazy, he said. I love crazy ideas. They made me rich, Simmons said with a smile. Dr. Lin suddenly seemed to come more to life as he turned halfway and stopped, pointed at them, turned around again, and started walking towards his bookshelves and boxes in the back. Are you guys familiar with genetic memory? It's a theory that all species share a common impulse to return to the point of origin, an evolutionary source, he said. Like spawning salmon? Ren said. Yeah, exactly. Dr. Lin said to the to a rather odd reference. Or a homing pigeon. So if this is the Titan's home and this life force sustains them, he continued, a Titan could show you the way, Ren said. Dr. Lin took a deep breath. Yeah, he said. And with a little help from an old colleague, Dr. Lin said while putting a magazine down, showing Dr. Aline Andrews as the Kong Whisperer. I think we can make this happen, he concluded. Meanwhile, on Skull Island, this place, it's suffocating. The tiny things scurrying about beneath me, they try to offer me food or roar at me in their language through those little currents. It annoys me. The entire island is my home. This cage is not my home. Gia, Gia walked through the forest and up to Kong, holding her little Kong doll up for him to see. The kind, tinier one visits me daily. I enjoy her presence, but she cannot fill this void. Kong looked up at the dome, which now sported several more signs of him having thrown things at it with damaged panels and sparking electric surge, causing visual artifacts and flickers. I want to be free again. A few hours later, Gia and Dr. Andrews were in the living quarters, with Gia hopping on the bed and Eileen searching for something. When she turned around after searching the drawers of the small dresser for the umpteenth time, she saw Gia holding a journal, which made her sigh in relief. She signed thank you to Gia and sat down just after hearing that she had a visitor. Gia pointed at her. You're nervous. Dr. Andrews shook her head. Everything's fine. Gia looked sad. You can't lie to me. I am not a kid anymore. Dr. Andrews smiled and laughed a little, shaking her head. She leaned in and gave Gia a kiss on the temple, and the pair of them got their raincoats on and went to see who was here for Lean. A power source in Hollow Earth? This is crazy, Nathan. Even for you, she called over the wind and rain as they all made their way to the door leading inside. It's there. We just need Kong to bring us to it. Dr. Lin asked called back. The second you take Kong away from this facility, Godzilla is going to come for him, she called back. Inside, after taking off their coats and entering Kong's habitat, Dr. Lin pressed Dr. Andrews. You even said you can't keep him here forever, he said. No, our meddling has already wreaked havoc on Kong's habitat, and there's no way in hell I'm letting you drag him halfway across the world just to use him as a weapon. No, not as a weapon, Eileen. As an ally. He can protect us and lead the way down there. That's all, he countered. What even makes you think that he'll go in? She asked. You always believed that Skull Island was like the Hollow Earth come to the surface, right? Well, that's where Kong's ancestor came from, he began. Mm-hmm, she mumbled. Through the entrance we found in Antarctica, we could help him find a new home, and he could, in turn, help save ours. Hers, he said, gesturing to Gia. The power source down there may be our only hope. Nathan. Ugh. Elaine, please. You saw how Godzilla's attack demolished Pensacola. That was just a small town. What happens when he starts turning his rage against over the major cities the world over? Humanity can withstand a lot of things, but we can't withstand the wrath of Godzilla, he continued. Dr. Andrews' breath hitched in her throat. She looked down at Gia, then at the ground, back to Nathan, and back to the ground as her breath finally escaped in a long hiss through her teeth. She turned away from Dr. Lin and walked a few steps out with her hands on her hips. The images of the news broadcast showing Godzilla's rampage and firing his atomic every which direction played in her mind like a broken record. And though she tried to fight it back, she couldn't help envision Godzilla appearing here on Skull Island and destroying the facility with everyone she knew, including Gia, along with it. One of her hands covered her mouth as she took another deep breath through the gaps in her fingers and let it out on a sigh, while turning around to face Nathan. Kong's our only chance, Elaine, and we have to take it. She stared at Nathan, and in her mind, she saw Kong battling Godzilla without a prayer, being beaten back, clawed, bitten, tail swiped, gored on Godzilla's spine, and blasted with his atomic breath point blank until he was barely a smoldering heap in the midday sun. Her eyes began welling up as her mind tried to fight these visions by rationalizing how Kong was strong, how he could hold his own in more ways than she gave him credit for, how he could use his intelligence and wits to outmaneuver Godzilla, how he could also have the help of humanity, how Sarasawa and the others said They had the tech to basically recreate this facility and its acoustic cancellation of the Kong's frequencies, so Godzilla wouldn't know he was being moved anywhere. She sniffed back the first sob and dried her eyes by closing them and breathing slowly. Okay, she finally said. Yes, Dr. Lin cheered. But when it comes to Kong, what I say goes. Got it? Yes, yes, you named the terms, he said excitedly while leaning rather suddenly to kiss her cheek. Uh, sorry, he mumbled while smiling and giving Gia a little wave. You won't regret this. Huh? I'm already regretting this, she mumbled back. Looking at Gia, Dr. Andrews sighed. This is his home, Gia sighed. Ours. Dr. Andrews signed back. Our homes is together, you and me. Gia was not convinced and looked down sadly on the verge of tears at her condo. Dr. Andrews sighed softly and put a hand around Gia's shoulders to gently coax her to come with her as they left the habitat area. In Japan, Dr. Sarasawa gave Ling a hug. You sure you can't stay just a little longer? Ling asked as they finished the hug. I'm sorry, Ling, but your sister and the others need me in America. We have a lot of work to do, he replied. Ling smiled somewhat sadly and nodded. I understand. Please be safe, she said. Serizawa nodded and looked back at Dr. Graham. Vivian, I need you to stay here with Ling and keep an eye on things as they develop. If you discover anything at all, I want you to call me immediately, he said. Yes, Sensei, she replied. With that, Serizawa got on the Monarch transport and was whisked away towards America. While on board and sailing smoothly through the airs above the ocean, he dialed a number on his phone and simply held it in front of himself as it rang and rang and rang. The name of the recipient of this call, Ren. His thumb hovered over the end call button and as he was about to click it, the ringing stopped. What do you want? Came a voice on the other end of the line. Ren, he said softly as he brought the phone to his ear. Speaking in Japanese, Serizawa began the conversation. Are you well? I suppose you wouldn't know, would you? Serizawa's jaw clenched and he felt a sharp twinge of pain ring through his heart. I'm sorry, Ren. It's a little late for that, isn't it? It's never too late to forgive, son. I remember that little sayings of yours, when the bullies at school would push me around and I'd come home crying, Mom. Mom was always the first one to help me, to talk to me. You only did after she got in your face about it. And then you'd lecture me about forgiveness and being proud of myself, no matter what they did or said or did to me. But your words, even then, rang about as hollow as the hollow earth itself. Sarazawa again felt a sharp twinge of pain sear through his heart as he recalled these events in the decades past. Ren, please. The only thing you ever talked about with Mom and me was Gojira, that or new Titan discoveries. You never asked Mom how her day was. You never talked if she was feeling well. You never asked me if I was doing okay in school. Everything was Gojira this or Titan stat. You talked about Gojira as so much I began to see him more as a big brother than a Titan, and may as well be part of the family with how much your life is dedicated solely to him. Sarazawa couldn't reply. He could only swallow the lump that was building in his throat. Don't call me again. We have nothing to talk about anymore, Ren said angrily before the call was ended. Sarazawa's hand trembled as tears flowed silent and free down his face. Be safe, Rand, he whispered. His lower lip quivered as he set his phone down, removed his glasses, and covered his eyes with one hand while resting on his elbow against the table. Chapter 8 Caution. Thanks for coming, everyone, Dr. Andrews began. Dr. Elaine Chan, Joan Ford, Dr. Lin, Mark Russell, and Dr. Sarizawa sat around a table on Skull Island as Dr. Andrews took her own seat. Nathan brought something important to my attention about Kong, and it happens to coincide with what we talked about the last time we were all here together. So Nathan, could you please? She asked. Yeah, right, he said as he stood up and cleared his throat. Hi everyone, I'm Mel. I met Walter Simmons from Apex and we talked about the Hollow Earth, he said. Sarasawa's jaws tightened as he glanced at the table. According to Simmons and Dr. Elaine Chan loudly cleared her throat, giving Dr. Lin a dangerous glare. Um, According to Simmons and his colleague, the Hollow Earth looks a little something like this. He set down the tablet which Simmons had given him from the previous meeting on the table and showed them the Hollow Earth hologram. Mark Russell, along with Joe and Ford, leaned in and looked in awe. It's massive. In terms of volume, it's got at least as much space as both the Pacific and Atlantic put together, and if our theories about it are true, it's the birthplace of all titans, Dr. Ling continued. Does anyone here know about the theory of genetic memory? He asked. Yeah, it's a theory about how all species have a drive to return to the evolutionary point of origin, right? Mark asked. Yes, yes, that's exactly it, Mr. Rochelle, and that's why I asked Aline to help me move Kong to the Hollow Earth, Dr. Lin said. Wait, what? Dr. Chen said loudly. Yeah, if we can move Kong to the Hollow Earth, we won't just be able to find him a new home. We might be able to find the source of the energy that's helping sustain the Hollow Earth. And if we do that, then we can create a weapon to kill Godzilla, right? Sarasawa said in a low, angry tone. Silence. No. I I mean, we could harness it to create new devices to repel him, Dr. Lin said. Sarasawa stood up and walked around the table and paused in front of him with a cold glare. I know Simmons, Dr. Lin. He's not interested in just repelling Gojira. He wants to destroy him, Sarasawa growled. That's not what he told me, though. He just said we could create a machine to defeat him, Dr. Lin urged. So, you admit then it is about weapons? Dr. Chen asked, glaring Dr. Lin down. I I don't know. I just want to get Kong a new home and reach the Hollow Earth. Dr. Lin took a breath. And finish the mission. My brother started to see it and document it. Sarah slowly turned and walked back to his seat. If Simmons wants in on this mission, then I want nothing to do with it, he said. But Sarisawa, if we can get Kong to the Hollow Earth, he'll be safe, despite having had access to the tunnels leading to it. Godzilla show no signs of wanting to go there. Kong will be safe, Dr. Andrews urged. Sarisawa gave her a hard glare. This isn't about Kong right now, Elaine. This is about Simmons and his reasoning for sending Dr. Lin and his so-called Heath vehicles to the Hollow Earth. He wants the energy for himself to make weapons because Apex Technology Division wants to monopolize the industry. He's made no real attempt to hide that effort. And it's no leap of the imagination to think that he'd weaponize such a power source the moment he got his hand on it, Sarasawa said firmly. Dr. Andrews let out a sigh. I care for Kong, Sarasawa. If this is what it takes to give him a new and safe home to live in, then I'm in, she said, crossing her arms. Sarasava looked to Joe and Ford. Gentlemen, what do you think? Joe shook his head and rubbed the back of his neck. I mean, I'm not exactly in the know about Simmons or Apex. I only just heard about them recently because I've been more focused on the more important matters, Joe said. Like being part of the family again, Ford said, giving his dad a pat on the shoulder, which made Joe smile. But as far as what Sarah was saying, I agree, Ford continued. It's no secret that people in powerful positions wants to weaponize anything they can get to get ahead hold in the world. I actually met a guy once who was a self-made entrepreneur, and when I pointed out after his rambling that he admitted to his success coming at the expenses of other people's livelihoods, and sometimes even the lives, he just scoffed at me and said there was nothing wrong with stepping over others to ensure their own success and future. Sarasava nodded slowly in tight lips. With all due respect, Mr. Brody, I think it's a bit of an unfair generalization that all people would behave like that or think like that one guy you met, Dr. Lin said calmly. Maybe so, but the main point here is that when people find power, it's a safe bet they'll weaponize it in some way, Ford concluded. I agree. We have seen it time and again in people like Jonah 5 years ago. The moment he got his hand on the Orca, he set Ghidorah free and nearly destroyed the world if not for Godzilla, Dr. Chen said. Yeah, but Jonah was a psychopath, Dr. Lin said. Not true, Sarasawa countered quickly, which got more than a few odd looks from around the table. But Sarasawa sat up straighter with a frighteningly calm expression. Psychopathy describes people who are emotionally dead, immoral, lack empathy, and cannot distinguish right and wrong. Jonah is none of those things. He was just like us in many ways. The only main difference was how far he was willing to go to see the Titans treated the way we all know they should, like creatures of the world instead of monsters out to kill us, he said calmly. Mark took a deep breath as his hand clenched on his knees. He had a very strong urge to speak out against what Sarasawa said, but Dr. Chan's hand on his shoulders, followed by a soft squeeze, prevented him from doing so. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her a little nod and looked back at Sarasawa. Dr. Len, we want to move Kong to the hollow earth for his sake, correct? Sarasawa asked. Yes, of course. He can't stay here on the island, thanks to these storms. Do you have any ideas how to move him safely? Sarasawa asked. Well, no. I mean, we can move him by ship, while avoiding Godzilla's known territorial water. Eileen said you guys have the tech to create some kind of dome around him to cancel his audio frequencies so Godzilla can't hear him, right? Sarasara shook his head. Such a thing is impossible on something as small as a ship, Sarasawa said quietly. Why? Because Kong's too big for that, Mark said, drawing all eyes around the table. He's just too big. If you put him on a ship, then inside some kind of tiny dome enclosure, it'd be like trying to put an elephant in your bedroom. It might just fit, but the psychological damage you could inflict on him by trying to force him to endure on a trip like that in such a tiny space is nothing short of cruel. I wouldn't ever wish such a thing on him. Silence. Dr. Lin sat down and sighed. Dr. Sarisawa, Dr. Andrews began, drawing off eyes. You said last time that we'd need to put our faith in Godzilla to show submission when he comes for Kong and hopes that Kong plays along and by not presenting himself as a threat, right? Sarah nodded, and Dr. Andrews glanced around the table. Then That's what we do. We'll load Kong onto a freighter and move him to the Antarctica entrance to the Hollow Earth. If Godzilla shows up on the way, then we let him approach, and do everything we can to keep Kong calm, and get him to play along with the idea that submission is the safest route, she said. Sarasara looked at Dr. Len. Dr. Len, I will accompany you all on one condition. What is it, Doctor? Dr. Len asked. Sarasara stood up. I want you to do everything you can to distance yourself from Simmons. If he gets his hands on that energy source, there's no telling what he'll use it for. Dr. Lin took a breath but looked firmly back at Sarasara. Sorry, Doctor, but I believe Simmons when he said he wants to make a device to defeat Godzilla, or at least repel him. If he goes ballistic on humanity again, we need something to protect ourselves. Sarasara's jaw tightened. But I will promise this, Doctor. I will promise that once we're in the Hollow Earth, I won't do anything other than observe and document as my brother originally intended. Sarasara shook his head. Not good enough, he growled softly. Not for me either, Dr. Chen said as she stood up and stood next to Sarasara. Ford silently walked over and stood with the pair, and was then joined by Joe as well. Dr. Lin looked sadly at everyone gathering against him. Even Mark eventually stood up and joined the others in standing against what he said, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew that there really wasn't anything he could do to convince them to come unless he gave in. But how could he? He believed Simmons, right? Yeah, sure. Why should he not? He was the head of a technological giant, sure, but he wasn't in the weapons business. And even if they got their hands on this new energy, how could it be used for weapons? It was just energy. Dr. Andrews heaved a heavy sigh and stood up to stand beside Dr. Len. If you all won't come with us, then I guess this is where we all say goodbye, she said. It would seem so, Elaine, Sarasara said quietly. I'd wish you'd come with us, Sarasara. You know Godzilla best. If you were there, I'd feel better about all this, she continued. Is there anything we can do to convince you to come? Dr. Lin asked. Sarasara glanced at him out of the corner of his eyes. If Simmons has demanded that any of his pupils are coming, turn them away. Only we, the people here, and those we trust, come with us, Sarasara said as he pointed to the people around him. Dr. Lin cleared his throat. I don't know if we can make that demand. Simmons is applying the heaves, and he insisted that his people come along to both pilot the vehicle and serve as security in case we find anything aggressive in the Hollow Earth. I asked if that was really necessary, and he said, My people don't go? There is no mission. It was kind of playful, but kind of not at the same time. Dr. Andrews rolled her eyes and shook her head. Sarasara, you've had to work with people you don't like before. Please, we need you. Kong needs you. So does Godzilla, Dr. Lin added, which drew Sarasara's attention much faster than anyone else in the entire conversation. I mean, think about it, Sarasara. The Hollow Earth is likely where Godzilla, like all Titans, were born. It might be clue to his power and his origins down there to give you more insight into what he is and how best to help him if your fears about weapons come to pass, right? Sarasara took in a breath. That's slow, Dr. Lin, Dr. Chen barked. Actually, I agree, Mark said, which made Dr. Chen's eyes widen in shock. Think about it, Elaine. The more we learn about Godzilla, the more we can do. What Sarasara's always said is possible, which is to live in harmony with him. The reason humanity's been so resistant to him and the other titans is because they don't understand them, and fear of the unknown is probably the single greatest source for aggressive reactions by humans in history. Understanding breeds acceptance. The more the world understands the Titans, the more easily we can help the Titans live in peace with us. Dr. Chan's teeth grits, and she slowly shook her head while Sarah watched quietly. Joe glanced up at Ford, who was already looking back to him with a quiet understanding. Sarah, Joe said quietly. Sarah looked at Joe. As much as I want to make a better informed decision on this, the logic in Mark's statement is actually really sound. One of the reasons a lot of people around the world fear nuclear energy is because they don't understand how safe it really is and how well we've come to understand it in our nuclear facility. If we did a better job educating people about nuclear power and how safe it is, and how basically nobody ever died while working at a functional nuclear facility in history, a lot of fear around it would go away, he continued. Serizawa listened in silence as Dr. Lin and Dr. Andrews nodded in agreement. Serizawa? Dr. Chen asked, seemingly the only one not convinced about all this. Serizawa took a breath and looked back to Dr. Chen and Lin, who looked back at him pleadingly. Finally. Finally? Very well, Serizawa said quietly. Dr. Lin and Andrews sighed in relief. I will go with you. If Godzilla comes as you fear, I will handle the response effort, he said. Dr. Chan let her head hang slightly as she nodded in agreement, and everyone confirmed the plans of action to move Kong while being wary of Siemens' ulterior motives for the energy source within the hollow earth.